My name is Gbolahan Justice, and relocating to the UK was something that really was fascinating for me. I remember having the conversation with a few friends who were also in the industry, and the major thing was, how do you intend to do this? When I was planning on migrating some 2-3 years ago, I didn't really have the funds. I had the connection, I had the document I needed for my application, but then I needed money to be able to achieve it. So I spoke to a few friends and were able to put 2 and 2 together, and then were able to run the application. I got the admission, I got the funds along the line. Sometimes I had to even borrow a couple of funds. And then I landed in the UK in September 2022. And the first thing I thought was, oh, my friend told me money grows on tree in the UK. And I felt, okay, let's see if this myth is actually correct. Unfortunately, it's not as people claim it was. And the UK has taught me a lot of lessons. I live in England, and specifically Northampton, to be precise. And moving to Northampton was quite something I didn't want to do, because I felt like London was where money is, where money dwells. And I felt like I was going to stay in London for a long period of time. But as soon as I got to London, I discovered that the rate of accommodation was quite expensive. And as a young Nigerian who just moved to a foreign country, I didn't have the resources to cater for that. So I had to move to Northampton, where I currently base. It's been quite peaceful to a large extent. I studied international law that is focused on human rights and conflict, and was a very good course. That was from the University of Hull. I finished that program, and I thought about staying back at Hull, which was about 5 hours away from Northampton. So I thought about it and felt like it wasn't going to be the best thing. For one reason, there were lower jobs opportunity there, and that's because they would rather want you to have more experience in some areas, which obviously I did not have. So I had to relocate to where I was going to get menial jobs, like warehouse jobs, and I had more opportunity at Northampton. So I ended up relocating to Northampton. Luckily for me, unlike some other people, I had a sister that I was staying with at Northampton, and it made the living situation quite easy for me. I've heard stories of people moving overseas and they struggle with accommodation, struggle with making friends, struggle with food. But for me, moving to Northampton was quite easy. I would say she was the angel that got sent to me, because if not for her, I probably would not have had anywhere to stay. Like I told you in the beginning of this conversation, I remember that when I was going to leave Nigeria, I had little or no money to even sustain me to a large extent. So she took me in for about 3-4 months, and I was able to stay with her. Sometimes I would help her to do some things that I feel like money could not do, because obviously I didn't have the money to pay her, so I was paying her back in kind. And I enjoyed my stay with her. She was very kind, very humble, and till today we still keep touch. And for me, going to Northampton at that point in time of my life was something that was very smooth, because I had someone there. Unfortunately, some other people don't have it that easy. I know a couple of people who had to pay their rent through their nurses. It was quite difficult. They struggle with the rent, the feeding, then the tuition fee as well. I mean, I can remember as well, at some point, because I wasn't working for a month when I got there, which is also another myth I'm going to talk about later on. I didn't have so much money, so I was still living on the naira I took to the UK, which was quite not so much. So I would have to convert the naira to pounds, and then before you know it, I've got little or nothing. So she was helping with my feeding, she was helping with the accommodation. I was paying rent. I was not paying rent for like 4 months. I wasn't feeding for 4 months. All I was hoping to do for her was to see if I could help out some other cleaning in the house and ensure that I had a very good behavior. Because for some people, it might be that little opportunity you have that would open up so many things for you. So staying with her was something I really enjoyed. But for some other people, they didn't have it that easy. And going there as a single applicant as well was something that was quite challenging. I've heard stories of people saying it was quite difficult to survive if you don't have your partner over there. And that's it. That's the truth. It's difficult because when there's 2 heads trying to make ends meet, it helps. But if it's just one person who's trying to figure out the rent, figure out the transportation, figure out the tuition fee, and then you've got this family back home wanting to also get a slice of the cut, it makes everything too cumbersome, and then the pressure starts setting in. So it was quite challenging for me as a single applicant, and I would also assume that people, when they want to go there, if they have the opportunity of getting married or if they are married as well, it helps them a lot in the long run to go with their applicant. Now, talking about me settling in, I would move a little bit to my tuition fee. I remember when I got there at first, I heard that I would get a job within 2 days. To be honest, it's not as easy as people claim it is. I struggled for a month, I couldn't get a job. I wouldn't say it was out of pride or out of lack of job, but it was because there's some documents that you have to have in the UK before you can actually get a job. Except if you want to work illegally, which is not something I'm going to advise anyways, but you have to have something called NI, you have to have your, I think that's the major thing you need particularly. Your BRP card can probably come to you as soon as you've got there. I think recently, later on this year, they're going to be taking off BRP card entirely, so you might not need that in the long run. But when I got there then, I needed my BRP, I needed my NI, I needed a bank account, and a few other things before I could get a job. And these things take a while. So it took me about 3 to 4 weeks before these things got ready, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go start off as a customer service representative. In my head, I was thinking I'll get something that huge. But I started as a warehouse operative anyway, so what I was doing was to get items from here. It was a logistic company, so customers would order items, would ensure the items are properly packed and all of those things. And I was limited to 20 hours in a week, so which means that if I need to actually make £800 in a month, it means I have to do more than 20 hours in a week. Remember, I wasn't taxed because I was a student, so for every 20 hours I do in a week, I wasn't taxed. 2022, I think we're getting paid £9.50 as a minimum wage. So for every hour that I work, I get paid 9.70 times 20. You could do the math. Unfortunately, I wasn't even working for 20 hours because nobody would offer you 20 hours. So I was working for 16 hours. That's 8 hours on a Saturday, 8 hours on a Sunday. And in the long run, I was working for about 15 hours because your break is not paid for. So in a week, I'm going home with less than £200. Remember, I've got a tuition fee of about £8,000 to pay. I've got my rent to pay. Unluckily for me, I didn't pay rent for like 2-3 months. I've got feeding and a couple of other things to do. So it was little or nothing. And remember, I told you at the beginning, I had a couple of debts back home that I needed to also settle. So the £200, which is obviously like 170, 180 in the long run, was nothing to be compared to. So it was a struggle, if I must say. But I'm happy that these things have really changed now. You know, I've been able to understand a couple of things. So then I would have to move from Northampton to Hull. Every Monday to Thursday I would go for classes. Sometimes I would miss my Monday class because I work Saturday and Sunday, and I finish at 10 p.m. so I couldn't get a train back to Hull. Remember, Hull is about 5 hours away. All of these things are the challenges that really you would encounter, because of course there was nobody to support me. And unfortunately, I can't miss my classes, because then there was this restriction that if you miss classes for a longer period of time, then you get penalized or you could get rusticated in the long run, because Home Office, which is what they call them, would eventually know that you're not doing enough, because of course your primary aim in the UK is to study, not to work. And you've told them at the beginning of the day that you had enough money to sustain yourself. So we all have this struggle in between going to work, getting shift, going to classes, surviving. And I felt like it's a different culture entirely. So I'm going to move straight into the culture clash. When I got to the UK, it was quite difficult for me to understand the way the system works. When I talk about system, I talk about the system of transportation. I didn't know how to use a Google map to a large extent. I thought it was just me moving from FCDA here in Abuja to Lugbe or something like that. It wasn't that easy. So you have to be sure you have the right bus. I can remember a couple of times I had to miss my trains because I didn't know what train to hop on. I didn't know what train to opt off. And there were no trains here in Abuja at that point in time, so it was really strange. And then there were buses. You have to check the bus number. Sometimes you have to check the bus stop to be sure you don't miss the bus stop. And a couple of times I would probably leave my card at home and they would want to use contactless. I didn't know what contactless was until I got to the UK. So some of these things were so strange to me. And when I got there, I would want to greet people, say hello to them just to know that I'm here. Nobody would respond to you. Everyone was just minding their business. So it was a whole lot for me to deal with. And I had a couple of friends who were like 50 years older than I was. I mean, I call them friends because that's what we call ourselves, our colleagues. And they would want you to refer to them as their name, Philip, David, their first name. And I'm like, oh, sir, you are 50 years older than I am, because sometimes you have access to their date of birth. And they would say, no, we don't do sirs and mars here. You have to call me by my first name. I had a couple of times my bosses would say, if you don't do this, then you're going to get penalized for it. I mean, that's jokingly anyways, but the major thing is you don't call people by their last name. Sometimes you could if you need to, but majorly you have to refer to them by their first name. So if you have Philip, who's probably 50 years older, you have to say Philip or David or something like that. And it was not something I was comfortable with. I remember when I got to the UK, I was still bowing down, not to touch, tell them, oh, okay, this is me saying hello and all of that. But nobody really cares about some of these things. So it was quite a lot of things for me to deal with. When I got to the UK in September, it was sunny and it was cold. I was wondering what's going on. I didn't know that it was close to winter at that time. So I had one jacket with me that wasn't so strong. And before I knew it, I started having cold. And my sister, the one I was staying with, then told me, oh, bro, when it's cold and it's sunny here, you also need to get yourself protected. I remember she got my first few jackets for me. It was quite a lot of differences, in terms of the environment, in terms of the weather. And the UK weather is so tricky in the sense that it changes over time. Sometimes it could be raining, sometimes it could be sun, the next minute it could be windy, and all of a sudden it could start being sunny again. So it was something that if you are going, you have to dress in a way that you are sure if it rains, I'm protected. If it's cold, I'm protected. And if it's too sunny, I can always take my jacket off. So the weather was so different. And then I had issues with the food as well. The things they were eating that I wasn't so comfortable with. I remember when I first got to Hull, University of Hull, I thought I saw chicken, at the restaurant. When I got home, in excitement, I took my jacket off, took my shirt off, wanting to pounce on the food, only for me to discover it was lamb. I haven't had lamb in my life. I never knew what it looked like. It was reddish. I thought it was the local suya we have here in Nigeria. So I felt, okay, let me just dive into this and eat. And then eventually I discovered it was lamb and I couldn't eat the meal. I just had to eat the chips. And the chips were too dry for me to even enjoy it. I mean, that was when I started knowing that there was something you have to eat the chips with, like the mayonnaise, the barbecue sauce. And that's because I wasn't so much into foreign foods when I was here in Nigeria. So it was quite a strange thing for me. And the local dishes are quite difficult to get. And Hull was quite a small city, so it was not so easy to come across the local foods. So I had to struggle with them. But aside that, the UK has been quite peaceful. The system works. There are good roads. For a long period of time, I lived in a country where there were no potholes. I lived in a country where there was 24-hour electricity. I lived in a country where people really cared about you. They were always wanting to ensure that you had your job, you were comfortable, and that you were not really stressed. The pressure was lower, and I was able to build a couple of network. It was quite important to me because I worked in a place in Nigeria before I left. I mean, the job not the job I left before moving to the UK, but the one before, the penultimate job, where it was quite toxic. Where the boss would be bossy and would want to ensure that this thing is done and that thing is done without considering the mental state of the person who is doing the job. When the boss was more concerned about the customers as against those who are actually doing the job, that is the employee. But getting to the UK where the system was quite better for me, where I was able to work at a pace that was comfortable, there was less pressure, and there was somebody looking out for me. I asked somebody I could go to for advice, to put me through. And mistake was something they never want to happen. So they will always ensure you have somebody to cater for you, to ensure that you are properly guided. So somebody was holding me by the hand to ensure that I was able to move through, which was why something I didn't really find here in Nigeria before I left. And another thing is, moving away from the job aspect, but something synonymous to it, is the fact that there in the UK, the system does not allow you to become too idle. You have to work. I remember here in Nigeria, I could still stay home for a couple of weeks if I needed to, because my job was quite flexible, and I'll still get paid and all of that. But over there, I see myself picking shifts, 8-hour shift, 12-hour shift. You can use your phone, you can talk to your wife, your husband, your kids. It's just work, and everyone is quite busy. I think that's one of the reasons I also felt like London would not be suitable for me, because everyone was just hopping from one bus to the other. And it was quite a challenging thing for me because I haven't worked in such a fast-paced environment before. So having to pick this shift and that shift, because obviously you have to pay your rent. In Nigeria, the rent is paid every year, annually, but back there it's paid every month. So you have to work, you have to pay bills. There's something called electricity bill, which it's all summed up as utility, but you have to pay for water, you have to pay to get a TV in your room, we call TV license, you have to pay for internet, you have to pay for gas before you could cook. So there is literally no way you could stay idle for a long period of time. So I see myself, at some point I was saying I wasn't going to go for a shift and all that, but then there was no money entering my account. So I felt like it was important that I needed to take the shift. So it's another thing that people need to understand, that it's not going to be a bed of roses. You definitely have to go there to work. I would really encourage people who want to migrate, not to the UK alone, but even if it's Canada, Australia, the USA, as long as it's a foreign country, you need to have skills, because otherwise you just see yourself having to do the same jobs over and over. I found myself quitting my job a couple of times because I got bored of them. I mean, I don't want to just stay in the logistic business for so long. So I saw myself quitting this one and that one. Not because I've fed myself up to my throat, no, but because I'm this person who is wanting to understand so many things, and staying in one spot just to learn about a particular business would really bore me. So I love things that are really exciting. And to me, at some point in time, I wasn't finding the job really exciting, so I had to just move away. But then with the skills I had, it was able to pave way for me, and I was able to get other jobs. Even from the comfort of the room, I was able to still do some things. And I had a company back home in Nigeria too that was also doing well. So I don't think it's best you throw away those skills, even if it's making of hair, even if it's shoe making, even if it's data analysis, even if it's tech, anything relating to skills that you feel is redundant here in the country, Nigeria. Trust me, when you go overseas, people cherish these things. I remember a couple of times I had nowhere to fix my shoes, and that's why I discovered that the European culture is all about not really fixing things in terms of maintenance. It's about buying things, getting a new one. So when your stuff gets damaged, they don't think about repairs. They think about just throwing it away and getting another one. So there's this culture of waste that I also noticed overseas. So I couldn't fix my shoes, even though it was just a thread and a needle that I needed. I couldn't do it because there was nowhere to get those things. And food was obviously a problem. And you can't tell someone, you can't tell someone from Nigeria to tell you to fix your shoes for you. It's not going to work. So I ended up throwing away my shoes to get another one. And funny enough, the cost of getting a new one is synonymous to repairing them. So that's one thing I've also noticed. They've made repairs quite expensive. I remember when my phones got damaged, it was quite a challenge because I couldn't fix them. They would rather tell you to get another one. I remember my laptop also had an issue. They told me that because I didn't get a laptop in the UK, I can't fix it there. So I told them, okay, that's fine. So they offered me another one. And another thing that works in the UK as well is the credit. So in the UK, you have access to loans, sub-loans that would not have interest, or that will have probably a little amount of interest. And they wouldn't bother you too much. You can spread them over 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, and you'll be so comfortable paying them off. And funny enough, the currency was quite good. I mean, I would assume it's still good now. I don't know when you'll be watching this video, but anyways, at the time when this video is being made, the currency was quite good. So you could easily convert the money to Naira, and then you could send them if you need to get something. And then it was quite easy for me to pay back my loans back here in Nigeria, and also to sort out the ones I had there in the UK. So something was something that was quite helpful. And the fact that everything is connected in the UK, from your phones to your call, to the calls you make, to where you stay, they've made everything so tight-knit to you that you can't really escape the system. If you need to get a train, you need to buy the ticket. Some people do some illegal things. But it's quite important to know that if you are ill-behaved in Nigeria, you can't bring those things to the UK because the system will not allow you to do that. And that's why I want to encourage people. It's not all about, I just want to leave the country. But then what are you going to be offering as well when you get there? What are the things you feel you need to drop here in the country? And then when you get overseas, what are the things you feel you need to also emulate? Another thing that I encountered in the UK was subtle racism. I call it subtle because it's not entirely expressed, it's not spoken about, but you can actually see it, you can feel it. And that has to do with sometimes when you need to get a job. I've discovered that, and funny enough, it wasn't with the people who are actually British, it was with the Western Europe. And I'm not going to call any names in this video just for privacy's sake. And you would find out that some of them would want to have only their people in the system. It could be at a place of work, it could be even in the house, trying to get an apartment to stay in. It wasn't so loud, but you could tell that someone who is got a different skin color would not get that opportunity just because of the tone of their skin. So it was something that wasn't so expressed, but you could feel it. So another thing was the issue with getting an apartment in the UK. They run a lot of checks. You can't easily get an apartment in the UK. It's so crazy because they have to have a guarantor who earns probably times 3 of what the rent is. And the best you probably would get is to probably pay in advance. So if your rent is, let's say, £600 a month, you have to get a guarantor who earns times 3 of that every month, or annually, probably times 3 of that annually. And or you probably have to pay 1,800, which is times 3 of the rent. They call it deposit, before you can get the apartment. And trust me, even with your money, it still doesn't guarantee the fact that you get an apartment, because a lot of checks have to go into play. And that thing I also liked about the UK is about the fact that you have to be in the right frame of mind before you can work. They take mental strength very particularly in the UK. They take it very seriously, because if you're not strong here, if you're not ready up here, they believe every other part of your body is not ready. So if you feel like you're depressed, you feel like you are anxious, you feel like you are nervous and you can't do your job properly, they would gladly let you stay at home, or gladly allow you go for a check, whether with a psychologist or something. So it was something that I also really quite enjoyed. Another thing I also speak about, which I really did not fancy, was about the fact that they had health system that was working, that we paid for, but it's not easily accessible, unfortunately. I remember a couple of times, if I need to see my GP, we call it GP, which is probably a doctor, so it would take months, even though my illness is quite severe. Probably I had a skin reaction, or I'm probably struggling with a cough, or probably I have something to do with a burn. They would need me to probably be on a queue, because they tell me a couple of people are already on the queue and they can't attend to me yet. So it was quite a difficult thing. I understand that they have a lot of people to attend to, but they don't take health issues quite seriously, except if it's a life-threatening situation, which is something I really did not understand. Because if I have cough, if I feel like I'm not stable, or I'm feeling dizzy, I would assume that I should be able to access doctor, like I would have access to a doctor here in Nigeria. But it's not the same over there. In most cases, they would tell me to just go to the pharmacy. I remember when I got to the UK, I think a couple of months after, because the weather was changing, I had sore throat, I had cough, I had fever. That was even when I discovered that flu and fever were actually two different things. So I had one of them, without flu or fever, and then flu and cold rather. I think flu and cold is different. Yeah, I remember I had one of them, and they told me that I could just go into the pharmacy and get what we call Lemsip. And after a couple of weeks, I got better. But here in Nigeria, if I had something like that, I probably would be walking straight into the hospital to run some tests and ensure the doctor sees me and tells me what to do. But you can't do that over there. If it's not life-threatening, that you have to call 911, or something that has been registered before, maybe you've got diabetes, or you've got hepatitis B, or a very chronic disease like or an infection or something, they wouldn't attend to you. So that's one thing I also found challenging, because I would assume that because they've got the right facility there, make it accessible, readily accessible for people. But then it wasn't the case with me. I mean, I don't know about some other people. Maybe they had a different experience, but personally, I couldn't access my GP for a very long time. Rather, I had to use the pharmacy, and sometimes they even ask for prescription. I can't see the GP, so how would I even get a prescription for that one or get? So that was something that was quite challenging for me as well. So the UK has taught me a lot of stuff. It's taught me to understand that you might not have too many friends, but you just need a few people to connect you to the right persons. And I've realized that there's beauty in having a very small unit, a very closely related, closely knitted unit. So that way, you have the brightness of minds to work with, and having a range of people to work with. That way, you might have people, but you might not have persons. In other words, you might have a lot of people contact, but there might not be somebody that could give you the right advice, the right information, because advice is something you need in a strange land. You don't have somebody to cater for. You don't have your parents. You don't have your siblings to look after you. It's quite different. But I believe that with the right connections, it could be in the church, it could be in the mosque, it could be in your school if you have gone through study, it could be even in your neighborhood. You just need to have the right connection to help you to be able to do some of these things. And I hope that in the long run, we'd really understand that our home is always going to be our home. So many things needs to be changed here in the country, Nigeria. But I believe that with the right exposure overseas, we can come back here, throw these ideas here, help people also understand that the system can still work. We can have a system here in Nigeria that would work, and that the UK, England, the USA, Scotland, Wales, no matter which part of the UK you are in, you can still do with whatever it is you have, with your skills, with your knowledge, with your ideas, and that you can still survive. it was quite difficult for me because I had nothing in terms of funds, but I had people who were there to support me. It might not be the same for every other person. So my little advice is try as much as possible not to have any expectations. Too many expectations could then end up making you feel depressed. And don't have the mentality that you want to go there and pluck all the money. There's money, yes, but you have to work for it. And as much as you want to work, remember your health is also important. If you put too much pressure on the body that makes the money, in the long run, the body will break down. And the money you've made, you won't be able to spend it. And also try as much as possible to ensure that you have a very good connection. Try to eat healthy and try to ensure that you don't build a network that will end up giving you too much trouble. Because in the long run, the closely knitted network you have, the better for you. And in the long run, the UK has been quite helpful. I must say it's made my workflow very good. I have access to so many things. I could get to make calls for free. Funny enough, I could get to make transfers for free as well. Unlike Nigeria, where you still have to spend so much on calls, spend so much on data, spend so much on having to make transfer to banks. Here and there in the UK, it wasn't like that. It was quite easy for me to do some of these things. And that's why I felt, okay, when I was living in Nigeria, I needed to also do something in terms of immigration. And currently I work with a company called West Ham Education and Migration Limited, which is into consultancy. So what we do majorly is to help people migrate overseas to the USA, the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany. Recently, we've also delved into the Schengen region. We're looking at places like Portugal, Spain, Italy, where people can have access to education at a very good rate, which is quite affordable, and also at a rate where they would not struggle so much, where your 1 year of study would not become 3 years of study. And you can have access to so many things, because one thing I've been a beneficiary for of is a good standard of education in the UK. I remember my classes were well AC, well air conditioned, if I could use that word. I've got the right tutors who were wanting to put me through. The library was well equipped, had access to internet. Even in the UK, they will even give you a laptop for the whole semester to use at no cost. It comes also with your tuition fee. So we've taught people that they could actually get access to this thing. So what we are doing really is to help people in different ways. One of the ways we're trying to do this is to ensure that people have access to scholarships, particularly in the USA, where if you have your IELTS, your passport, your work certificate, your transcript, your certificate from school, we can easily help you connect to schools in the USA where you can get scholarships, and we'll charge you nothing. It's actually free at the moment. And also it's for schools in the UK as well. We have a couple of schools that we also work with that you can actually have access to soft scholarships, probably like 50% off, 20% off, or probably £5,000 off your tuition fee, and to go a long way into helping you. I remember my tuition fee was just about £9,000, unlike people were paying 18,000, 15,000, 20,000 pounds for a master's program. And £9,000, even though it was a lot of money then, it was still something very much helpful. So we believe that we can help people do this. And I'm also a certified tutor. I could teach PTE, I could teach IELTS, I could teach TOEFL. And I believe that if you join us, if you sign up for our services, we'll give you the best of services. We'll also ensure that we don't just treat you as a client, but as a brother, as a sister, because the goal is not just to get you to the UK or to Canada or to Australia or to get you achieving your dreams, but to also see how we can create a relationship. So we're all about building relationship. For us, it's not about the money we get, but then can we help you achieve your goal of leaving Nigeria to do better things? We are not a fan of leaving Nigeria and not coming back. Of course, some people do that, but then if you feel like that's your goal, no problem, we can help you achieve that. But the goal is to ensure that you can get to understand how the system works overseas, and maybe you can bring the ideas back home to see how we can also build the country. And if you don't want to come back, all good and fine, but the major goal is you have to achieve that dream of traveling abroad. And West Ham Education and Migration Limited can also help you achieve it. You can reach us on +234 8068 166369 or 07727 314626. I take it again, 080 68 166369, or the UK number is +44 7727 314626. And if you want to reach us via email or social media or any of the platforms, it's www.westerhameducation.com, or you could use the other, which is www.westhamedu.com. So West Ham is spelled WESTERHAM, edu.com. or you can check us on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media platforms. It's Western Edu, as simple as that. Western Edu. So we are right there. We are willing to also assist you with the processes. It doesn't matter your budget. The major thing is tell us what you want to study, tell us what you want to do. Unfortunately, we don't have any work visas for now, but we are sure that if it's a study visa, we can work with your budget. Even if it's 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, we can work with it and we can get you out there and to help you achieve those dreams. Thank you for listening to me. My name once again is Gbolahan Justice Abiola, and I hope that this would help somebody out there and we can end up sharing more ideas and it will really go a long way.